told the story that he played country and gospel with them for a little bit too long, to the point where Sam had to kind of tell him to take a time out, which could translate to you failed the audition, basically, and they knew that, and they started to try to change direction a little bit. In fact, they took a little break, and during the break, Elvis started to mess around over here by himself with a blues song that he liked. It was an Author Big Boy credit song called That's All Right Mama, and by the time Scotty and Bill came in on the song, Sam was already through the door telling him to do it again. And they cut the record, and at 2 o'clock in the morning, Sam was so excited about the record that he took it to his friend, Dewey Phillips, the DJ that I told you all about upstairs. And just to reiterate, if you were a cool kid in Memphis, you were listening to this guy on the radio. And if you were a cool parent, you probably weren't allowing your children to listen to him on the radio. So 3 nights later, Dewey Phillips debuts Elvis. And I have that here for you all to listen to. So this is the first time Elvis was on the radio, July 8th,
Oh, yes, sir, good people, so Phillips. Let's bring the hottest cotton-picking thing that cuts a real hot blue. Coming through WHBQ in Hotel Chisco on the magazine floor. It's right, Dave? That's right. Party call Sam Putney. I got to call Sam, Dave. Pete Picker. Hey, come on there, Ern. Good to see you, Ern. Hang on, buddy. Very good, Putney. It's more like it. All right, it's okay. Nervous, Snoop? All right. Just go on down and get you a wheelbarrow load of mad hogs. Run them through the front door and tell them Philip sent you for it. Hot and blue. Go. I got a new song we're going to play here. They're going to cut loose this new song. I mean, that'll flat get it.
Well, that's all right, Mama. That's all right for you. That's all right, Mama. Just any way you do it, that's all right. That's all right. That's all right, Mama. Any way you do.
Dewey, the record-breaking DJ, played that song on his radio show that night 14 times in a row. Wow. He played it over and over again. Wow. And the next day, Sam signed Elvis to a 3-year some recording contract in our gift shop next door, which was a restaurant at the time called Taylor's. And everybody was happy for a little while, right? And it was a short period of time into that contract. You guys, I'm sure, have heard some of this story. So 17 months went by. It was October 1955. Rock and roll was really exploding outside of the South for the first time. And Elvis had put out 5 records here that were really great. And still, Sam Phillips financially wasn't doing very well. He had a couple of lawsuits. He had a lot of musicians he was trying to pay. And he decided that the best thing to do for Elvis's career and for the business was to sell Elvis's contract to one of the many major labels that was trying to purchase it. So it went to a really big label, RCA, for the record amount of $35,000, which was a lot of money in 1955. So much so that Sam called it the best business decision he ever made. And it sounds strange, I know, but it's true for a lot of reasons. Basically, though, after that, Sam was able to consistently pay rent here, all while paying a whole bunch of new musicians from around here who became really important in American music. Legends and rock stars and all the guys you see around you on the walls. You all know Roy Orbison back there in the sunglasses. Arguably the best vocalist in the entire industry's history, and he did all of this cool rockabilly here. So Ooby Dooby was done in this room, and Rock House, and Domino, and Claudette, and Devil Doll, and then after that he went on to have a kind of an interesting pop career with hits like Pretty Woman, but all the early stuff was done here. Carl Perkins up there on the wall is one of my favorites, single biggest influence on the Beatles, and he started out in this room. Actually, he got the first gold record here, which was 1 million copies in the 50s. And Sam had told everybody the first person to do that here would get a brand new Cadillac. So here's the song that got Carl Perkins a brand new Cadillac.
Well, it's 1 for the money, 2 for the show, 3 to get ready. Now go, cat, go, but don't you step on my blue suede shoe. You can do anything off of my blue suede shoe.
And of course, Elvis did do Blue Suede Shoes the same year, just a few months later. Elvis's version was not as successful as Carl's, surprisingly, but eventually it did kind of take the legacy of the song to the point where a lot of people are unaware that Carl Perkins recorded it and wrote it and had this huge hit with it. What are you going to do? So, Carl got all the writers' royalties out of it. What?
So why did he cover it? Why?
So back then, it was much more acceptable and common for somebody to cover their contemporary even that quickly. You know, it'd be like right now if Beyonce had a huge hit and then Rihanna did it like 2 months later. That was totally normal. It was like, oh, he made so much money off of that. Maybe I'll do that and make the same amount of money. But there was oftentimes royalties deals that were, you know, even. So.
No animosity to the other person who went off and just did the song?
No, and sometimes, but in this case, that's definitely not how it happened. Actually, this is a really unique case, and I will get into it a little bit just because you're curious. So Carl Perkins was like on the rise with Blue Suede Shoes, right? He was supposed to play Ed Sullivan, and got in this horrible car accident. I mean, major facial reconstruction in the 50s, okay? And he was in the hospital for a long time. And while he was in the hospital, Blue Suede Shoes was a hit. Elvis Presley actually went to see him in the hospital, and it was during that time period that Elvis asked Carl Perkins if he could cover Blue Suede Shoes and then do it. And Carl was apparently extremely excited about the idea. So, you know, that definitely is a very unique case. But Carl and Elvis were really good friends. And just a little note about Carl, I've heard a lot about all of these musicians from all kinds of people in the past 8 years that I've worked here. And I've heard all kinds of interesting stories, and some good and some bad. But I've never once heard a bad word about Carl Perkins or a bad reaction from him or him being any sort of problem. But it's pretty interesting. And entertainment law was such a new thing too, so it's kind of the wild, wild west. But yeah. But speaking of that, I read his autobiography, and it said that he got that Cadillac and found out Sam took it out of his royalties. But it was all forgiven in the end, and that was the way the whole industry was. It was a funny story nonetheless. So Carl, I'm sure you guys are trying to cash back there in the